And away we go, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from around the world. Welcome back to another episode of the Real Leel Show here on the Can You Dig Sports Radio Network. We are live weekdays from 10 p.m. to Eastern Time, 12 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Time on the MyTuner Radio app. And we are also on the YouTube channel and the Spotify, the Real Leel Show, in case you guys missed a segment, didn't catch the live, didn't listen to it on the radio show. We're on Spotify. We are on Apple. We are on YouTube. So make sure you tap in the Real Leel Show. And when I tell you it's going down to kick off the week, it's going down to kick off the week because it is. And you know what? I just feel like venting a little bit for like 30 seconds because Zoran, all right, Zoran, the moron Mondani, okay? You need to clean up the streets of New York. I mean, driving to places that should take me 10 minutes, no more. It's taking me 40 minutes because your behind cannot clean up the streets. All right. I understand you're new to be the mayor. I didn't vote for your behind. Okay. I'm gonna just make that clear. I never voted for you. All right. I think you're a fake cat, if you ask me. But you could have won me over a little bit by how you handled your first test of adversity with this storm. And guess what, my guy? Okay. You failed. All right. And that's just what it is. But for those of y'all that are watching this show, even if you got something going on, I appreciate y'all tuning into the show because there are 1,000 other things that you could have been doing, but you chose to lock in, and I appreciate that, and I won't let you down because when I tell you we got a stacked show, we do, and we are going to break it down. We're going to talk about the hiring process of the NFL. There was no black coaches hired in this cycle. We're going to do a deep dive into that. We also got the GM of the Vikings that got fired. We're going to talk about that as well. And we also had a big fight that took place. I thought it was a big fight. I mean, the name was a big fight. It was a beatdown. We're going to talk about that. Shakur Stevenson and Teofimo Lopez. We might as well begin. And I got my guy Lee in the building. Lee, once again, we knocking these episodes out. I'm glad to have you on as a guest on this show again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Got some great topics. We jump in and hey, we need to get it in anyway. And hey, we want all the comments to come in because seldom do we agree on everything. So we need a tiebreaker.
Definitely. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be topics here that we disagree on. And that's what we love to do. We love to debate, and we might as well let the debates begin. The NFL is set to enter the 2026 season with 3 black head coaches with 0 getting head coaching jobs this cycle. Does the NFL have a race problem? Lee, the mic is yours.
Well, yeah, you know, when you look at where the NFL has been in the past, and you know, last year they had 6 African-American coaches, head coaches in the league. Now it's down to 3. This year, you know, 70% African-American players in the league. Of course they do. Sports Illustrated did a study over the last 25 years, Leo. From 2000 to 2024, and there were 173 coaches, coordinators hired during that span. Only 31 of them were African American or black, right? That's only 18% of the hiring. It's only 18% of the hiring. Within that same span, that same time span, of the 19 coaches that were hired, 8 of them were fired after the first full season, right? 11 teams have never had a black head coach in the NFL, right? And there's only been 20 African-American coaches in NFL history. So, of course, we've always had a racial problem as far as hiring of head coaches in the NFL, and it continues today. When you look at, there was zero in 2025, there was 0 offensive coordinators that were of African-American descent in the NFL. 0. So where the most of with the way the league is constructed nowadays, offense, where do those coaches come from? They come from the offense. There are a few defensive minded coaches, but it's an offensive league. So 0 African-American offensive coordinators in the league. There were 12 defensive coordinators. So yeah, it's a problem in the head coaching hires, and there's also a problem in the coordinator hires where the potential coaches come from. So yeah, it's a real problem. It seems like it's digressing and not getting better. I think as time has evolved, we do all of these Rooney Rule interviews, and they're a scam. Are any of these people that are being hired really being set up to be hired as a head coaching candidate? I think not. So we've digressed. We have a problem, and I don't see the problem getting better anytime soon, Leel.
I mean, look, does the NFL have a race problem? Look, I think any corporation you go to, there's going to be people. I don't think you can't tell me that there's nobody in the NFL that's not racist. I think that's anywhere you go. I think that's always you're gonna have bad apples, you're gonna have good apples. Just like how everybody try to generalize, law enforcement. I have people that I grew up with that are cops today. I can't generalize them, but are they racist law enforcement? Probably. And I could say the same thing about owners in the NFL. Now, the way how I would agree with you in the sense is, do they have a minority hiring problem? Because it's different when you talk about racism and you talk about minority hiring, right? Because I think a lot of that is relatable, and I'm gonna dive into that later on in this topic about relations and how that mixes. And I'm talking through my experience and in the workforce and other people's as well. Now, do they have a minority hiring problem? Clearly they do. That's why they incorporated the Rooney Rule. So if they didn't, they wouldn't have created the Rooney Rule, which for those of y'all who don't know, and y'all should know by now, it forces teams to give 2 minority candidates interviews. And I believe if you hire a minority, you get a draft pick, right?
Yep.
Now, I'm not a fan of the Rooney Rule in the same way that I'm not a fan of DEI hires, because I believe that you should be hired based off your merit and qualifications. I think that when you look at the Rooney Rule, is a waste of time. For example, when the Patriots fired Gerard Mayo for Mike Vrabel, we all knew that Mike Vrabel was going to get the job. I mean, I would have bet in my life that he was going to get the job, and I was proven to be correct. But yet they interviewed Brian Lettridge, they interviewed Pep Hamilton, and it was just a complete waste of time. It was a waste of gas. I hope they paid, for them to get there, they travel fees and whatnot, because we all knew it was going to be a waste of time. Ideally, in the perfect world that we don't live in, we know that you do not want the Rooney Rule, just like you shouldn't want DEI, because you want the best person for the job with the best qualifications. With all due respect, Lee, I don't care who this offends. I don't want a woman being the pilot of my plane that I'm on just because she was a woman. Respectfully, I don't listen. If that offends anybody, well, you do it. You ask for the plane with the woman with no qualifications. You know what I'm saying? That's the reality. Now, the problem that I have, Lee, and this is going to be the perspective that I'm going to bring, because yeah, you could say there's some conservative values that I have, but there's also radical stuff that I believe in, right? I'm more of a radical than anything. If you're going to talk to me about change, you're going to have to be the one to create the change. And I say that to say, instead of labeling the NFL as a racist league for not allowing black people in larger numbers a seat at the table, how about you push, and how about not even push, but how about the billionaires, the black billionaires, create their own table? Okay, instead of Jay-Z going back and forth, taking round trips to Epstein Island. Okay, and I'm gonna get deep on this show. All right, instead of Diddy, hey, ain't nothing like a Diddy party, right? LeBron James, right? Instead of him having freak offs, why not use all the resources, come together and create your own league? Because this is not only an NFL thing. I worked corporate jobs before, and when I noticed some racist stuff going on, I got the hell up out of there. People in the NFL is not going to do that, right? Because they pay well. Obviously, you're not going to leave a $1 million job. It's easier for me to leave the job that I was at because I wasn't getting paid that. But that's neither here or there. It's not an NFL thing. It's a world thing, right? It's different jobs. So to me, the reason why you got guys like Matt Ryan and Tom Brady getting opportunities in those hierarchy positions, like president of football operations, like minority owners, over guys like Cam Newton, who literally is crying all day for a seat at the table. when you're Cam Newton, you have the image, you have the popularity, you have the equity to build your own. And he's doing that. He has his own, YouTube channels that's doing pretty well. Instead of you hating on Tom Brady for the broadcasting job that he has, how about you create your own table, which you're doing? How about you invest into more of it? Right? How about you become the Mr. YouTube like Shannon Sharp did? And when they got rid of his behind on ESPN, he's still big. You got to create your own table, because at the end of the day, a lot of these guys, and I'm gonna end here and let you get back in here, Lee. A lot of these people do not relate to us, and that's just a cultural thing, because there is a cultural thing. I think it is. When you look at all the owners, right? Clearly, there's no black owners. You have a bunch of white owners, right? Let's call a spade a spade. And I feel like they hire people that they can relate to, and that's just the unfortunate part. So instead of us trying for a seat at the table, instead of us, calling the NFL a racist league, you're gonna have racist people everywhere you go. It is what it is. That doesn't mean every owner in the NFL is racist. How about you create your own league? How about, guys that are billionaires that are black come together instead of having these freak offs and taking round trips to Epstein Island, come together and say, you know what? Let's create our own league and let's see who the players that are currently in the NFL would go with them.
Yeah. It'd be difficult. It's been tried over and over to create competing leagues. That hadn't worked out. I doubt if it will work out. Two things that you said, Lil, I want to push back a little bit on. When we talk about DEI hires in the Rooney Rule, and I'm gonna put those two together. For me, DEI doesn't mean you're not qualified. DEI just means that we're getting you in front of people that are doing the hiring when you otherwise wouldn't have gotten in front of. There's no pilot that's going to be hired to fly a plane that hadn't went through FAA regulations. So same thing with the Rooney Rule. These people that have been in these coaching jobs and have paid their dues, they want to get them in front of these coaches, similar to the way Mike Tomlin got his job with Pittsburgh. He wasn't the number one choice. Mike Tomlin came in, got in front of the Rooney family, put a fabulous presentation on, got the job, and we're talking about 18, 19 years later. So yeah, I don't believe it's people that are unqualified. I think people, they're qualified within what is the scope and the criteria to have these jobs. They're just getting them in front of people where they otherwise wouldn't get the opportunity. Now, let me fast forward it to the NFL. When you look at, and you talked about Mike Vrabel, and I just want to, for the audience, just throw out a little bit something as far as Mike Vrabel and the New England Patriots. Gerard Mayo got the job last year, right? First year as a head coach. He paid his dues on the New England staff. Mr. Kraft hired him, okay? He was fired after 1 year. But let's peel the onion back a little bit, right? Gerard Mayo came in free agency in 2024. The New England Patriots spent $131 million on free agent salaries, contract value salaries. Okay, $131 million. They fire him after a 4-13 season. They hire Mike Vrabel, and they spent $364 million of contract value this year, completely overhauling the defense, bringing in all these high-value free agents, and you see the results. Well, the question I have is, why didn't they do that for Gerard Mayo? Why didn't they spend the money for him to upgrade the talent around him and give him that same chance, firing him after 1 year? When you look at the teams that spent the least in 2024, the Jets spent $107 million. Houston spent $86 million. Tampa Bay spent 46 and Atlanta spent 90. These are all the African-American coaches. We talk about money that's spent in free agency to upgrade the talent and get them better. That's not a coincidence. It seems like sometimes the black coaches are stopgaps. Yeah, we want to see if you can coach, but we're not going to give you the resources and put equity into the franchise the way that they do to some of the white coaches when they get the job. I'm not saying that Mike Vrabel is not a good coach. What I'm saying is
Super Bowl,
you spent $364 million to help him be successful? Why didn't you spend that money for Gerard Mayo 1 year ago and you fire him after 1 year? Last thing I'll say before I turn it back over to you, 14 offensive coordinator positions were available last year in the NFL. Do you know how many black people got those offensive coordinator positions? 0. Again, you're not setting the African-American black coaches up for success to get these head coaching jobs, and then you wonder why no one is hiring these guys. All they do is get the young, hot white coordinators, or they retread coaches that in a lot of times haven't been successful, but they get the second opportunity. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. But when you peel back the onion and you look at this stuff, it's not equitable when these guys get these jobs. And, you know, you have, and you made a great point. They're not getting in front of these people because they don't have, you know, similar backgrounds and things. But hey, you can't be able to get in front of them if you don't have a Rooney Rule or something that makes them get some type of interviewing of these candidates of African-American descent. So it's a catch-22, but the numbers just don't support GMs, owners supporting their African-American coaches. Remember, New England, number one in free agency spending for the 2025 season.
Well, look, New England is in the Super Bowl. So I don't really think Robert Kraft is going to have any regret. In fact, Mike Vrabel coaching them to the Super Bowl makes his point justifiable, makes his action justifiable. I understand it was shady in the sense that, you know, he made a Godfather decision. He learned from Bill Belichick. He's a king of Godfather decisions, right? That's why he's a Hall of Famer in some regards. It's not always going to be pretty. And look, did he use Gerard Mayo as a front man, maybe to get out of the Bill Belichick regime? Because clearly he wanted Bill Belichick out. Sure. But I'm going to offend some people here. It's the same way, and I'm pretty sure I did already. It's the same way that people, though, for example, ESPN does it a lot, right? They're the king of DEIs. They throw these women up here that clearly don't know anything about the game. So we can sit here and say they're qualified and whatnot. When they get on the air, a lot of them, and I'm not going to say all, because they are, like Doris Burke comes to mind, knowledgeable of the game of basketball. I learned a lot from her. Right. So I don't want people to generalize me, trying to not generalize people. Right. But at the same time, there are some women that all they have is makeup, blonde hair, Becky with the good hair, don't know a lick about the game. Yeah, they may be qualified in the sense that they went to broadcasting school, right, and whatnot. But that doesn't mean they're qualified to talk about the game. And yet ESPN shoves them down our throat. And, you know, even some of the highest paid people on ESPN don't know jack about the game. But that's neither here or there. Coming back to my point, did the same thing happen to Gerard Mayo? Was he used in the same way corporations and TV use certain people? Because maybe they need a woman hired, maybe they need a black man hired, right? To fit so to make it look like, you know, it's diverse. It's going to happen, and people are going to get used, and that's unfortunate. That doesn't make it right, but that's the reality. It's been going on. It is going on, right? And people are not benefiting from that because you look at it, who is the opposite? That's not a person that's qualified, right? Now, I want to go back to the point that I want to make of, you know, Brian Letwich and whatnot, right? Because, yeah, sure, we could generalize things and we can acknowledge that a lot of black coaches does not have a seat at the table, right? Because it's obvious that it's not when you look at the numbers. But there is, to call the racist the league racist, to me, that's a bit generalizing. That's why I disagree, because if you do that, you're going to not bring up some of the positives. For example, Mike Tomlin, you mentioned him, basically coaching the team for 2 decades, probably should have been fired, right? Probably last year, you know, as far as, yo, your team is stuck, but yet they was patient with him. They didn't even have no intentions of firing him. That's why they hired Mike McCarthy, right? A couple years ago, Lee, you got a guy like Bruce Arians on the Buccaneers. He hired the most diverse coaching staff in the NFL. Everybody on his staff was a minority. And he sat back and allowed both Todd Bowles and Byron Leftwich to call plays in the biggest game of the world in that Super Bowl. I remember that. I'm like, okay, look at these 2 black coordinators, you know, calling plays for the GOAT Tom Brady and the Buccaneers in the biggest game for the world to see. He stepped down. He anointed Todd Bowles as his second in command. He took over as head coach, and he still has a job to this day. Now, obviously, we know his stint with the Jets, it didn't go well. A lot of coaches are going to fail in New York, so he got a second opportunity because somebody was proactive about the situation. Brian Leverage could have had a job. He turned it down. The Jaguars job, I remember that. They actually offered him the job. He turned it down. My point is, if you're Lamar Jackson, as important as you are, because I really, Lee, the problem I have is maybe I'm just so radical. Maybe I'm the person that, if I was a slave back then, I'd be like, you know what? Let's get out of this. That's how my mindset is. I'm not worried about somebody granting me release. I'm not worried about somebody granting me a seat at the table. I grew up with a lot of people like that. Oh, man, I just want a seat at the table, man, so I can feed my family. How about you create a business and invest into it and get your people to support you? And yeah, that's another conversation because sometimes your own don't support you. But anyway, take a guy like Lamar Jackson. As important as he is to Baltimore, he could have demanded to have a black head coach if he wanted to. The same energy that he had trying to get his contract when he requested a trade is the same energy he could have had by saying, you know what, I want a black head coach. In the NBA, and I'm going to hit a lot of y'all with a lot of punches here. In the NBA, the Brooklyn Nets, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, when they were over there, they practically ran the franchise, okay? They were making personnel decisions. They had the opportunity to hire their coach after they railroaded Kenny Atkinson. And instead of them go with a black head coach, they went with Steve Nash, okay? And people like to say that Mark Jackson is blackballed. How about you hire Mark Jackson? You have the power to do so. You hire Steve Nash. So again, we cannot sit here and just talk about, oh, I want to sit at the table. Players have power, more power than they ever have had in any time in sports. And even people with less power did more to exercise their power. Look at what Muhammad Ali did. Look at what the dude before Colin Kaepernick that sat during the anthem. His name is not ringing in my head, but there was a Colin Kaepernick before Colin Kaepernick. In a time where people had less power, we saw people do more to exercise their power. In a time where people have more power to make change, they're not doing anything. So, yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, I just don't think Lamar Jackson or any pro athlete has that power to demand from an owner who's a billionaire that you're going to hire a black coach. I don't think that's never going to happen.
Request a trade again. He got his contract.
Lamar was busy trying to get his own contract settled, and you saw how much he had to go through to get that contract. So he had to demand a trade. So I don't think that's going to happen. And the main thing here is
Lamar has the same power that Josh Allen had, because clearly Josh Allen was in those interview searches, in interview jobs, as interview meetings rather, and his input was definitely taken. Lamar Jackson could have been like, "Yo, what's up?"
Yeah, think about Josh Allen's when he got his contract. There was no type of controversy. They gave him the money, Leo. There was no type of pushback. Lamar had to request a trade from Baltimore, and he really was blackballed, and there was some collusion there to get him to go back to Baltimore. So I doubt Lamar didn't have that type of power to demand a coach or anything like that. He can demand his money, which he's going to get paid again. But the coaching thing, I disagree with that. But what I'm saying to you is this. When you peel back the onion, there's a systematic way that when you look at, as I said earlier, of the 19 black coaches that were hired between 2000 and 2024, there were 19 coaches. 8 of the 19 was fired after the first year on the job. Come on, man. You're not even giving them a chance to be successful. And then when you look at this money that's being spent and when they spend it and what they do, New England's the perfect example. I'm not saying anything about Vrabel, the coach. I'm saying that the organization systematically went about it totally different with Vrabel than they did with Mayo. Why is that? Why didn't you saw how porous that team was when Mayo
took over New England. Robert Kraft. To be fair,
Robert Kraft, his whole organization, and his son and all of them. They didn't.
Mike Vrabel had a lot of equity already.
Doesn't matter.
And
It's about winning, Leel. It's about winning. It's
and
about
guess
winning.
what? They
What
in
are
the
you going
Super
to do to
Bowl.
win the football games?
Point proved. They're in the Super Bowl. He saw the golden opportunity to hire Mike Vrabel. That's the guy he really wanted. If Mike Vrabel was available, because remember, he had just got fired from Tennessee. If he was available prior to Gerard Mayo getting the job, he would have got the job.
I don't disagree with that, but you hired Mayo, and if you wanted to make Mayo successful, then you would have went out in free agency and spent money like you did for Vrabel this year. That's all I'm saying. We're talking about an organization being successful. What do you do to be successful? And if you're not looking at spending money and bringing free, they upgraded basically at every level of their defense this past year, from the line, the linebacking crew, the secondary. They didn't do any of that for Mayo, and you wonder why he only won 4 games. Come on, man. That's crazy. And then you look at the spending. The Jets didn't spend anything for Aaron Glenn. Houston didn't spend anything for DeMeco Ryans, 86 million last year. Tampa Bay, only 46 million for Todd Bowles. And then even Raheem Morris, only 90 million, where other teams are spending in the 100 millions. Something's wrong with that picture, Leo, when you peel back the onion of what we're doing to make our coaches successful. And then you move on from a Raheem Morris, right, after 2 years. Come on, man. That's not equity. And so when we talk about racism or a systematic way of how you deal with people, it's clearly that the white coaches get dealt a different way by the ownership than the African-American coaches, which is a shame, because you have some great coaches out there that are not getting the backing of ownership.
And this is my last point. And look, I'm not disagreeing with everything that you're saying, and I want people to understand that. My take is really coming from a player empowerment, more of, create your own table instead of having this conversation that we've been having for a long time. Because at the end of the day, I noticed from real life as well. Not only, obviously, I'm not in the NFL, but even in corporate, I mean, look, it happens. Like, these people, they relate to certain people culturally, right? And they just gravitate to the people. It doesn't make it right. It's not right. I think you should expand your horizons, right? And obviously evolve. I think the world is all about evolving. That's what it should be, right? In any aspect of life. You don't want to be that same guy that's doing the same thing, making the same choices. You want to evolve. But unfortunately, the league is not evolving. And that's why I feel like in order for the wealth to be spread, it may not be spread in this game, because although the majority of the players are African Americans in the hierarchy positions, the majority is not. So as long as that continues to be the balance of structure, it's not going to change. So what we're going to do next year at this time? Oh, well, there was one black head coach that was hired. Do we have a problem? Yeah, clearly. The problem we had yesterday and the year before. What are you doing? And what are the players doing? And what are other people doing to be proactive about changing it? Because clearly the NFL has been here longer than I've been here, clearly, right? I was born into being an NFL fan, okay? My dad held me in my hands while he was watching the game, cheering on his team. So again, it's about people being proactive. And I feel like a lot of players have the power to really inflict change. I mean, look, for example, if there was to be a boycott, sure, money would be affected. But these are things that are happening in real life every single day at different corporations. People walking out of the job, people having strikes. But, when you get your money and you get that money that, the owner's cutting you the check for, and it's really good money, it's very easy to not worry about these things. So again, that's where I'll leave it.
My last point, the NFL, as far as striking and player boycott, if you've seen over the years in every work stoppage that has been led by the NFL Players Association and strikes, they never, ever win in professional football, because you have billionaire owners and you have millionaire players who are not unified enough to keep on the strike line, and they don't want to give up what they give up. The last thing I'll say, and this brings it home for me, They've been playing professional football for well over 100 years. And if you tell me in 2025, going into 2026, there's 11 teams, a third of the NFL that has never had a black coach, that's a problem.
Sports, politics, conspiracy theories, we are here to give you our unique perspectives on things happening in the world. It's the one and only, The Real Leel on The Real Leel Show.